One of the things I asked you to do this year was to look back at some formulas that you learned in Algebra 1. There were 3 of them that I asked you to look at. I'm going to show you ways to factor using all 3 of those formulas, but the one that I'm going to focus on the most is this difference of 2 squares formula, and the reason I'm going to focus on that one more so than the other 2 is because there are ways to factor without using the formulas for the other 2. However, the only way to factor a certain type of problem, which I'll explain in a moment, would be with these 2 or with this one formula. So first thing I want to point out is if you remember this formula from previous unit, then notice that this gives me a squared minus b squared. Why does it give me that, you might ask? Well, remember, because when we use the FOIL and we multiply first times first, outside times outside, so a times a is a squared, a times minus b is minus ab, b times a is ba, which is the same thing as ab, and b times minus b is minus b squared. My middle terms drop out, so leave me with simply a squared minus b squared. So the big thing that we want to do when we're factoring is go back to a multiplication problem. So if I'm given something in the form a squared minus b squared, if I want to go back to multiplication, I can go back to what my formula was before I FOILed it out, which was a plus b times a minus b. The other formulas, as you may recall, is if you have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. You got that because you originally had the problem a plus b squared. If you have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, you get that because you have the original problem of a minus b squared. So going over our steps for factoring, so we've already talked about how our first step will always be to ask ourselves, is there a GCF? And if yes, let's factor it out first. And now we're going to add on this second piece that I just talked about. Do you have either perfect square minus perfect square, or either a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, or a squared minus 2ab plus b squared? If yes, we want to use a special formula to help us factor. So first thing I do is I look at example 1 and I ask myself, is there a GCF? I see that there's nothing that both of these terms can be divided by. So the next thing I ask myself is, do I have perfect square minus perfect square? And I notice that yes, I do. This is the same thing as x squared minus 3 squared. Therefore, I can say that I have an a squared minus a b squared, where a, the first thing being squared, is x, and b, the second thing being squared, is 3. Well, therefore, according to my formula, a squared minus b squared is a plus b times a, whoops, not a, I want to use x because x is my a minus b. And now I am in my factored form. Looking at example 2, I go through very similar steps. The first thing I ask myself is there a GCF? I see there is nothing that all 3 of my terms can be divided by. So then I ask myself, do I have perfect square minus perfect square? I do not. However, I am in the form a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, or at least I think I might be, because I notice that I have an x squared here and a plus 7 squared here. So I'm going to ask myself, is 2 times x times 7, is that 28? I notice that it's not. 2 times x times 7 is 14x. Since 14x, oops, I wanted to ask if it was 28x. Since 14x does not equal 28x, I see I cannot use a special formula here. I cannot use a GCF. There is a way to factor this, which we will talk about later, but for now I'm going to go ahead and say that I can't factor this. Looking at the next 2 examples, I'm going to go through my same process on example 3. First thing I ask myself, is there a GCF? Doesn't look like there's anything that both 25 and 121 can be divided by. The next thing I'm going to ask myself, is this perfect square minus perfect square? Well, I notice that 25x squared is 5x squared minus 11 squared, so it looks like yes, it is. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I have a being 5x and b equaling 11, and I do have a squared minus b squared. Therefore, according to my formula, I have a plus b times a minus b. This is a formula you will be required to know. And then finally, looking at my last example, example 4, Again, I first asked myself, is there a GCF? I noticed that yes, I can divide both 50 and 162 by 2 since they're both even, so I'll start there. I'll put that out front. Please make sure you do not lose it. It doesn't just go away. Minus 81. From here, I can now ask myself, is it in the form perfect square minus perfect square? And I notice, yes, it is. This is the same thing as 2 times 5x squared minus 9 squared. Therefore, I have an a of 5x and a b of 9. And according to my formula, I'm going to go ahead and say that this inside piece here is going to become a plus b times a minus b. The 2 stays out front. So a plus b times a minus b. And I have successfully factored my original problem, and I am done. So big thing is, please make sure you are remembering to check for a GCF first. I see students forget that all the time. Also, please make sure that you notice that if it is a number other than x squared, that the 20, for example, on number 3, notice my a was 5x, not just x. I also see that mistake a lot.